So at the moment, I think we all know that the UK economy is not doing very well, and the latest data shows that it's getting much more worse. So the latest figures on inflation and job market are very concerning for all of us. GDP has fallen again in May, following a drop in April, and this two-month contraction wiped out most of the spring gains that were very highly celebrated in the mainstream media. And although I strongly believe that short term statistics like monthly or quarterly GDP figures are not very effective at painting the true picture of the economy, and it has to be viewed in conjunction with other main indicators. So I was hoping that, okay, maybe the other main indicators of the economy might signal something positive. But to my surprise, and to the surprise of everyone in the mainstream media, those indicators double down on the fact that the economy is getting much worse very fast. Now, very briefly, I want to go back to the point I made about the media. And by media, I mean these large news outlets. Why is it that every time there is some bad news about the economy, most of these mainstream media houses start putting out the same exact news articles with the same exact analysis? And it's funny because I'm subscribed to a bunch of these, so I check the news every morning. And whenever there's a bad news about the economy and I go over these articles, they all try to push the same narrative as if for some reason, whatever bad happened to the economy was totally unexpected. This is just one example of this when the recent inflation data came out, and you can see a pattern of how similar the reporting really is. Is this a coincidence? Not really sure, but it's definitely annoying. Anyways, carrying on with the actual data we have, let's look at the unemployment rate because yet again, it rose by 0.1% to reach the highest level since June 2021, when it peaked because of the pandemic. And since the Chancellor increased the employer's national insurance in the last year's autumn budget, it only came into effect from this April. So the rise in unemployment was pretty much expected, and it is more likely that the unemployment is going to rise further as employers will be hit with a higher tax bill from HMRC as a reward for hiring employees. So we will probably be seeing more layoffs into the future. And 0.1% may not sound like much, but if in only 1 month unemployment rate rises by that much, then trust me, it is a very bad sign for an economy that is already struggling. And comparing this to last year's unemployment rate, it is 0.3% higher, which is again a small number, but this 0.3% represents an increase of 124,000 unemployed British workers. So these may be small figures on paper, but they have a significant impact on the real economy. And I want to come back to the point I made about the unemployment that it is going to rise further. The reason I concluded that is because we have actual data showing a significant drop in active job vacancies, which are now at 727,000. And this is the lowest level of active job vacancies in a decade. And the slowdown of the job market means that the household incomes would reduce. And this will likely be a main factor the Bank of England is going to consider this month when it is set to revise the interest rates. And this situation puts the bank in a very weird dilemma because the inflation is rising while the household incomes are falling. So if the bank reduces the interest rates, it will push up the inflation even further. Now, staying on the topic of inflation, so let's look at some of the latest figures that we have. So, unexpectedly, again, the consumer price index rose to 3.6% in June, which is the highest level in 18 months. And of course, this was obviously unexpected because everything is just so much cheaper than it used to be. Well, at least for the people that are writing these news articles, it may be. But I think for the rest of us, we all expected the inflation figures to be much higher, and the actual data on inflation does not look good. The target set by the Bank of England for inflation is 2%, and we are almost about to put another lap on that target. So maybe the Bank of England should consider the competence of the people running the economy next time while they are setting these targets. Now, moving on to the public finances, which, to be honest, are as bad as the other indicators, if not worse. And I know I have to be the bearer of bad news right now, and I really wish it was the other way around, but unfortunately, these are the actual figures that we have, and they are not painting a very good picture of the economy. So the borrowing rose to 20.7 billion pounds, which is about 6.6 billion pounds higher than June of last year. And the problem is not with the borrowing itself, because the governments all around the world borrow and they rely on debt to function properly. The problem is that much of this was driven by a massive debt servicing cost, as interest payments on government debts have risen to a recent high of £16.4 billion pounds in June. So, in other words, a large proportion of this debt will be used to pay off interest on the previous debt. And unfortunately, every extra pound that is spent on the interest payment is a pound that is not spent on your schools, your hospitals, and the infrastructure. So, as a result of this additional borrowing, the public net debt has now climbed to 96.3% of the GDP, a level that was last seen in the 1960s. And even the OBR have warned that the UK's fiscal path is quote unquote unsustainable. So, the bad news for you and me now is that the analysts are now expecting a further tax increase or spending cuts in the autumn budget to try to limit this debt exposure. So, to summarize, the UK's economic momentum is getting worse very quickly. Output is shrinking, businesses are cautious, households are hurting, and the government books are in the worst shape than expected. And now the expected interest rates hike this month is going to be another knockout blow for the economy. The Chancellor of Exchequer is under more pressure than ever, and the latest data suggests that more tough choices are coming. In the meantime, we, the people, need to brace for a tougher economic winter.